half of Port Royal sank in 3 minutes. The lucky ones drowned. The year was 1692. History says an earthquake swallowed the pirate capital. History is a polite liar. The ground didn't fall, it was pulled. Captain Elias Thorne watched the streets vanish from his deck, his knuckles white on the rail. He wasn't mourning the dead, he was staring at the abyss left behind, a chasm opening into the black crust of the earth. They opened it, Thorne muttered, a cold sweat masking his face. Below the sea, the smugglers' city was waiting, and the ocean was pouring inside. Getting down was suicide. Not going was worse. Thorne's first mate, a silent shadow named Rusk, laid out the skin map. The edges were still smoking. The sunken city wasn't built by pirates, Rusk noted, his eyes flicking to the corner of the room. Standing there was Vance, the rival, elegant, smirking. No, Vance purred, cleaning his nails with a stiletto. We merely borrowed the architecture. In the corner, the navigator, half blind and trembling, stroked a rusted astrolabe. The earth has veins, he hissed. We are sailing into the blood. A cannonball shattered the mainmast. The navy had arrived. To the depths, Thorne roared, masking the violent tremor in his hands. He hated the dark. He hated the crush of the water, but he loved surviving. They rode into the gaping maw of the ocean floor, swallowed by the subterranean throat of Port Royal. The sea above them became a ceiling of churning glass. Rusk rode steadily, his gaze fixed on Vance, who was casually dropping silver coins into the black water, a trail. Feeding the fishes, Vance? Thorne spat. Just paying the toll, Captain. Then the rowboat hit solid stone. The water vanished. The underground city of Port Royal defied God. Vast obsidian arches towered over dry, echoing streets. It was impossibly dry, but it was pitch black. Thorne struck a flint. Nothing. He struck again. Normal fire won't breathe here, the navigator whispered, holding up a strange skeletal lantern. These require a warmer oil. Vance chuckled, stepping back. Rusk drew his blade, offering his own palm. Before Rusk could cut, a gunshot echoed through the cavern, shattering the lantern in the navigator's hand. From the darkness of the arches, a crisp, disciplined voice rang out. "You're trespassing, Elias." Commander Sterling stepped into the dim light of their surviving torches. The pursuer. He wasn't here for justice. The obsession in his eyes was sickeningly personal. "You dragged our family name through the mud," Sterling sneered, cocking his pistol. "Now you drag it under the earth." Thorne forced a smile, though his chest tightened with creeping claustrophobia. "Good to see you too, little brother." Vance moved, not to attack, but to kick the only structural pillar holding back the ocean ceiling. Stone cracked like thunder. The sea began to bleed through the roof. "Run!" Thorne bellowed, as a waterfall of black ocean crashed between him and his brother. The crew sprinted deeper into the alien metropolis. The streets angled sharply downward. Thorne's lungs burned. His childhood nightmare, drowning in the dark hull of the Eurydice, was happening awake. He stumbled. Rusk caught him. "Breathe, Captain. The sea hasn't claimed you yet." Vance darted ahead into a narrow corridor, laughing. Rusk pushed Thorne forward, then triggered a hidden lever on the wall. An iron grate slammed down, separating Vance from the rest. "Oops," Rusk said, his face a mask of absolute stone. Vance gripped the iron bars, his elegant smirk finally slipping. "You think this cage will hold me, Rusk?" Vance hissed over the roar of rushing water. "No," Rusk replied calmly, "but the water will." Thorne stared at his first mate. Rusk wasn't just a loyal dog, he was a silent executioner. But Vance pulled a familiar rusted key from his vest. Rusk froze. It was the exact shape of the jagged scar on Thorne's neck. "I have the captain's secret," Vance smiled, turning the key in the cavern wall. The floor beneath Thorne vanished. Thorne fell into the abyss, landing hard on slick ancient wood.
He groaned, Rusk and the navigator landing violently beside him. Thorne looked up. They weren't in a vault. They were on a subterranean dock. Moored in the subterranean harbour was a ship, not wood, but carved entirely from black, iridescent leviathan bone. The leviathan's wake, the navigator wept, falling to his knees in the glowing subterranean fog. The map wasn't showing a treasure room, it showed a port. The cavern shook violently. The water from above was filling the harbour. Suddenly, Sterling dropped from the ceiling, cutlass drawn. Nowhere left to run.
The navigator traced a trembling finger over the bone hull. A ship built not to cross oceans, but to dive beneath them. Thorne ran a hand over the cold, seamless gunwales. A submarine ship? Exactly, a voice echoed. Sterling, the pursuer, stepped from the shadows of the dry dock, his pristine navy coat ruined. He hadn't chased them down. He had known the shortcut. You think you're clever, Elias? Sterling sneered, leveling his weapon. You think you can outrun your own blood? The cavern began to hum. The water wasn't just rising, it was boiling.
Are you going to arrest me? Thorne yelled over the roar of the rising, churning tide. We're dead in 5 minutes. Sterling's eyes were wild. I don't care about the crown. I want you to admit why you left me in that flooded hull when we were boys. Thorne's charismatic smirk vanished. His darkest secret laid bare. The wound he carried every time he looked at the ocean. Paralyzing claustrophobia. Before Thorne could answer, a shadow detached from the ceiling stalactites. Vance. Family therapy is so tedious, the rival mocked, aiming twin flintlocks at both brothers.
Hand over the map, Rusk, Vance demanded, stepping onto the ship's gangway. Come take it, Rusk replied softly, his hand resting on his cutlass. The cavern was flooding violently now. Water surged over the docks, swirling around their ankles. Thorne stared at the black tide. His breath went shallow. He was suffocating, trapped in the memory of his childhood failure. He couldn't move. Sterling looked at his paralyzed brother, a flash of realization hitting him. Vance fired. Rusk dodged, but the bullet shattered the ship's only manual release lever. They were anchored to a sinking stone. Vance lunged at Rusk, their blades colliding in a shower of sparks. The elegant rival against the silent executioner. You're a loyal dog dying for a coward, Vance laughed, kicking Rusk to the wet planks. The water reached Thorne's waist. The ship was groaning, the massive subterranean anchor chains pulling the bow under. The moorings, the navigator shrieked. They're jammed underwater. Someone must dive to the base and cut the primary lock, or we go down with the cavern. Sterling grabbed Thorne's collar. Elias, look at me. But Thorne was already looking down at the black, freezing abyss. Thorne didn't speak. He just drew his heavy boarding axe. He looked at Sterling, a silent apology 20 years late, and threw himself into the black water. The cold hit him like a hammer. Complete darkness. Suffocating panic seized his chest. He was a boy again, dying in the hull, but this time he wasn't running away. He swam downward, his lungs burning, the crushing pressure fighting him. He found the massive iron locking pin. He swung the axe. Once, metal shrieked. Above him, a body hit the water violently, but Thorne swung again, shattering the lock. Thorne burst through the surface just as the anchor chains whipped free. Sterling hauled his gasping brother onto the deck. You didn't run? Vance didn't surface. Only his elegant hat floated on the churning black waves. Rusk stood by the rail, cleaning his blade. Suddenly, the ship's ancient mechanisms roared to life. The hull sealed itself, massive glass domes locking over the deck. The cabin ceiling collapsed behind them in a deafening thunderclap of falling rock and crushing ocean. The leviathan shot forward, plunging into the bioluminescent depths of the Earth's underground sea. They had survived the descent. They stood in the eerie blue glow of the subterranean ocean, safe inside a ship made of leviathan bone. Thorne breathed. The oppressive weight of his past finally lifted. He clapped Sterling on the shoulder. Brothers, at last, in the dark. "Captain," Rusk murmured. Thorne turned. The navigator was staring at the ship's massive compass. The needle wasn't pointing north, it was pointing straight down. And from the absolute blackness beneath them, something impossibly large began to rise, its shadow blotting out the bioluminescence. The map hadn't shown a treasure, it was a warning.